Brave uphold all the dying samurai spirit. It feels almost as though I am speaking to my ancestors. Instead, I speak to a reflection of myself. The man in the mirror, in another place, another time. Our allies are filled with confidence and bravado. But I am troubled. My dreams are haunted by a man in shadow. I fear this vision may be a portent of our destruction.
The game's on-disc map, Shadows of Evil, introduces what seems to be yet another separate story in the vein of Mob of the Dead. By the way, you see the word shadow in the map's name? Yeah, that definitely doesn't have anything to do with the shit Maxis and Taki were talking about in The Giant, and that certainly doesn't have anything to do with the story written by the racist man with the funny cat. And I absolutely did not make a self-contained video discussing just that, and by discussing, I definitely don't mean just summarizing the entire story. I mentioned the Prohibition Era while discussing Mob of the Dead and pointed out how far removed Alcatraz was from the glitz and glamour associated with criminal enterprises in the cities. Shadows of Evil places us in a city in that general time period, though to glorify the criminal enterprises in any way would be to deeply misunderstand just how dire that era in the US truly was. It emerged as a misguided attempt to curb the perceived societal ills associated with alcohol consumption, but instead just unleashed a torrent of consequences throughout the nation. One of the most notorious consequences of Prohibition was the rise of organized crime. Bootlegging operations flourished as criminal syndicates capitalized on the demand for illicit alcohol. Notorious mobsters such as Al Capone became household names, their empires built on the illegal trade of alcohol. As the leader of the Chicago outfit, Capone orchestrated a reign of terror that included bribery, extortion, and even murder, but he was far from alone in his criminal exploits. Across the country, rival gangs vied for control of lucrative bootlegging operations, leading to a spate of violent conflicts that left trails of bloodshed in their wake. Corruption permeated every level of society, with even law enforcement officials and politicians on the take, lining their pockets in exchange for turning a blind eye to illegal activities. Prohibition exacerbated existing social divides as well, disproportionately impacting marginalized communities. Wealthy individuals could afford to circumvent the law through private clubs and bootlegged imports, while the poor suffered the brunt of enforcement efforts. The era saw a surge in arrests and incarcerations, disproportionately affecting working-class neighborhoods and communities of color. In the end, Prohibition did little to curb alcohol consumption, but instead just gave rise to a criminal underworld that thrived on lawlessness and violence. A criminal underworld that never died out, only bolstered and diversified. And in the wake of the Prohibition era, we step into Shadows of Evil, in a city full of that same perceived superficial glitz and glamour the criminal underworld was associated with at the time. But what's more important to us now is not the backdrop of the map, but rather the four characters it introduces. Four characters that each commit the ultimate sin: murder. Each of the characters has their own motive for why they have undertaken such a heinous act. The first one showcased is Jessica Rose. She's this femme fatale type of character who speaks of this photographer who's come to have explicit photos of her. Photos that pose danger to her aspirations of becoming a movie star. As she finds herself very close to a movie deal, she makes this arrangement with the photographer where after she sleeps with him, he'd get rid of the photos. After he comes to meet her though, she makes sure he'll never tell anyone. Then we're introduced to this corrupt cop on the take, Jack Vincent. As the mayor of the city is investigating the police department due to rampant corruption, he goes as far as to kill his associates to make sure word of him never gets out. This would not be his only murder. Next, we see an ambitious, up-and-coming boxer, Floyd Campbell. He talks to someone who sounds like his promoter or manager, promising him that the outcome of an upcoming match with the #1 contender for a title fight would not be in any doubt. It's then that we see him wielding brass knuckles, thereby answering the question of just how he'll remove any doubt from the match's outcome. He got what he wished for. Finally, we're introduced to this failing magician, Nero Blackstone. we hear him phone his lawyer, asking them just how much debt his wife has accumulated, literally right before asking if their life insurance policies are still valid. Clearly, the ideas of tact and subtlety are lost to Harry Houdini over here, but upon getting his answer, he stages the murder of his wife in a magician act gone wrong so that he may claim her life insurance policy and pay off any debt. It's then that we hear a voice. In a seemingly simple question that bears a strong existential quality upon further thought.
Why do you do the things you do? Do you not see the futility of your...
We saw how Mob the Dead has this heavy importance placed on the concept of sin and especially atonement. To see that idea revisited here, combined with a similar time period, lends heavy credence to the idea that Shadows of Evil is a kind of direct sequel to Mob the Dead, both plot-wise and in character. This is practically confirmed with the many references to the mobsters from that map in the forms of character quotes and in-game locations and items. Not to mention the literal plain Icarus showing up once again, but the most important similarity still stands to be thematic, having to do with the concept of sin and atonement. And so, we're given a name to put to the voice. The Shadow Man. What a goofy with how Takio mentioned a man in shadow and how Max has alluded to a dark presence, it's very likely that both Mob the Dead and Shadows of Evil are not actually separate from the main storyline. The idea is extremely interesting due to the nature of Mob the Dead and the question of who it was that imprisoned the four mobsters. Given the religious themes in that map that had to do with sin and atonement, one could have easily brushed it off as, oh yeah, that's like Satan, duh. But now it's a huge mystery because we know it's not Richtofen and we know it's not Samantha. The map took place decades before World War II and the events of World at War, so could it have been the Shadow Man? Did he imprison the four mobsters, just as he imprisons the four characters in Shadows of Evil? At the end of the day, it's a direct parallel. The four characters committed the ultimate sin, murder, and were subsequently placed in this twisted alternate dimension where they are forced to atone. The parallel ends as soon as it begins, as unlike Mob the Dead, we have actual help offered to us by a third party. Actual hope, if we do exactly what the guy called the Shadow Man tells us to do. I'm absolutely sure he is not of a devious nature whatsoever, no sir. And it's then that we realize just how dumb the characters are.
You bear the mark. You are cursed. You must place your hand upon the stone.
You fucking talking to me?
The characters, they listen to the guy called the Shadow Man doing exactly as he says, but in their defense, when you're placed in a twisted version of what used to be your reality, there wouldn't really be anything else to do, so I guess you might as well help the guy called the Shadow Man, for real for real? The parallels to Mob the Dead get even more weak as we step out into the city and see just how much of a contrast this map poses to Mob. Mob is this grim, gloomy prison that serves to be the embodiment of the word twisted. It looks and feels like it is a part of hell, with rotting corpses and ominous signs placed all over the map, pointing to the futility in our escape plan. Shadows of Evil, though, is literally just downtown Chicago, and the zombies trying to kill you just makes it more realistic, honestly. Upon closer inspection, though, things are admittedly off, with strange alien-looking plants all over the map, and these eerie sounds you can hear in what seem to be strange hymns and chants, as if something is being worshipped. When you take your investigation one step further and look for any possible audio logs or radios that could shed more light on what this city truly is, you can notice these telephones that ring after certain events. Interacting with them would play the audio logs, but instead of gaining more clarity, things just get more confusing.
Hey, Mr. Rapp, just checking in. So, I'm here. Finally. Taking in the sights, sounds, and smells of Morg City. I know you sent me here to write a piece about the city's bustling nightlife and theater scene, and the characters that inhabit it, but things are getting kind of strange. Even though no one seems to want to talk about it, something is definitely off about this city. Just last week there was a media shower. A freaking media shower. And everybody acted like it was no big thing. Then, the mold showed up. All over the city. In the dark, damp alleys, there's a strange kind of fungus growing. It looks weird and smells even weirder, but nobody really says anything. Then people started getting sick. At first it just made them delirious, confused. Then they really got sick. It was like they were wasting away. People finally started talking about it. I spoke to one guy in his 80s, a fruit seller, at the local market. He said something similar happened in New England in 1882. When I tried to press him on it, he just lowered his head and ignored me. If you ask me, something definitely ain't right here.
So then, a story is established, where a reporter comes to this very place, Morg City, for a job his employer, Mr. Rapt, tasked him with. But before long, he notices the eccentricities of the city. For those of you familiar with the works of H.P. Lovecraft, you may have noticed that the premise is very similar to one of his stories, The Shadow over Innsmouth, where an antiquarian goes to this fabled town enshrouded in mystery, only to discover the true extent of the rumors and legends associated with the place. I have made a video quickly summarizing that exact story and how it relates to Shadows of Evil if you're interested, but there's yet another story of Lovecraft that the map strikes a parallel to. The color out of space. While it's true that there's no one story to which a parallel is being struck, the color out of space stands out as being one of the more obvious ones. It follows an unnamed narrator who aims to visit this rural farm west of Arkham, Massachusetts to learn more about a supposed supernatural event that occurred there. He ends up meeting with this old, allegedly crazy man who had been involved in the event itself, the event being a meteorite that crashed on the property of one of the farmers in the area in 1882, bringing with it an inexplicable, unearthly color beyond all human comprehension. The color began to seep into the land, causing bizarre mutations in the crops and plants in the area. The crops started to simply grow unusually big at first, before it was realized how they were completely inedible and fetid. Then they began to grow more and more abnormal, almost alien-like, with a bizarre phosphorescence inherent in their cores, the same color as that of the meteorite, the color that is beyond all human comprehension. Now soon thereafter, everything organic on the farm started getting affected, from the grass to the animals. I highly recommend you go read the story yourself. It's quite short and has every Lovecraft trope that you could possibly want, from the insane old man who conveniently knows everything about a place of interest to incomprehensible shit beyond the comprehension of humans who are, of course, otherwise able to comprehend things normally. Lovecraft, when you tell him that there exist colors outside the visual spectrum, be like, you mean to say there really exist things beyond human comprehension? Clearly this is the work of the great Cthulhu. Proceeds to write his entire mythos. Someone should have showed him the COD Zombies lore now. That shit is what's beyond all human comprehension, though, for real. If it isn't obvious, the idea of there being a meteor that brought with it organic corruption is also present in Morg City. If not the entire COD Zombies lore, if you go back far enough. Remember when this shit was just based on a simple meteor? Yeah, me neither, bro, but like the clearest nod to the story here in Shadows has to do with how the reporter mentioned that a meteorite had supposedly fallen in New England back in 1882. The same exact place and date of the meteorite in The Color Out of Space. When you connect those plot details to the bizarre plants around the map, if you can even call them plants, and how they seem to be glowing different shades of color themselves, it's undeniable that this map is built upon a Lovecraftian foundation. That idea is lent even more credence when you consider the overarching plot of The Shadow over Innsmouth and how it relates to the reporter. In that story, this one old drunkard tells the protagonist about the history of the enigmatic town in question, mentioning bizarre things that lead said protagonist to believe he's crazy. It's not much different in the case of the reporter in Shadows of Evil.
Hey, Mr. Rapt. So, I went by the market again today. For some reason, the fruit seller was much more talkative. Even if what he said was more than a little crazy. He told me that when he was a boy, his uncle would get drunk and start talking about how a dark force cast its shadow over the city. How good and evil were battling right on our doorstep. And that the only thing holding back the forces of the apocalypse was the ancient order of the Keepers. Well, even if what he said was more than a little crazy, I'm not sure he was. Even though they're scared, or maybe because they are, people are talking more. Asking around, I've heard more than a few whispers about this ancient order and the Keepers. I think it's some kind of cult. They say you can hear them chanting sometimes, from beneath the city. There's all these rumors about human sacrifices and freaky shit that even the police won't investigate. Because they've been paid off, or because they're too damn scared. I'm not sure what to believe anymore.
So with all of this talk of twisted eldritch truths hiding behind everything, I mean, there must be more to Morg City than just this, right? After all, it wouldn't be Lovecraftian without the horrors beyond all human comprehension, which is practically what Lovecraftian horror is all about, where knowledge of and about greater entities can utterly destroy a human being's psyche. I make fun of it a lot, but the analogy of an ant and what it might think after suddenly acquiring the knowledge that a fourth-dimensional cosmic god might have for even just a second really drives home the idea of what it could do to humans. But perhaps the true horror is having your world turned upside down, with the undead relentlessly coming after you.
Your world, as it was, is still here. Shifted slightly, wrenched from its rightful place. Many of the souls who inhabited it have succumbed to the darkness. They are echoes of themselves, trapped in a fractured shadow of reality.
The Shadow Man, he offers us a way out, a way to have everything go back to the way it was, but only if we confess our sins. He tells us of a mark on our hands, signifying our curse, emphasizing that the only way to break the curse is through confession, specifically by accepting our sins. He tells us of items we can find around the map, and through finding the items, we learn of just how peculiar they are, or rather how specific they are. A wig, a detective badge, a championship belt, and a pen. Clearly, these items are related to each of the 4 characters, symbolizing their sin in some capacity. In picking these items up, though, these strange beings appear from makeshift portals, trying to stop us. Something the Shadow Man acknowledges.
These are our true enemies. We must hurry. The Keepers seek to hasten the collapse of the dimensions.
It seems that when the local fruit seller told a reporter of these Keepers, he spoke factually. The exact motives of these strange beings cannot be known, and up until now we have not had any supernatural entities the likes of the Keepers apart from the Vril-Ya. There are differences and inconsistencies in that mode of reasoning though, as the Vril-Ya are said to be these strange, ethereal, almost angelic entities whose entire beings are so perfect and beautiful that humans struggle to make sense of them. Here, the Keepers wear robes that some would seem sacred, with a symbol on their chests resembling the one found on the Templars from Origins. The symbol somewhat resembles the Black Sun. There are many theories surrounding this symbol's origins, with one that can be kinda relevant to the map Origins in that in Norse mythology, it represents the absence of light and life, symbolizing the underworld Helheim, where the souls of the dishonored dead dwell. Those that don't die in battle and thereby ascend to Valhalla or Folkvanger end up in this underworld. For context, Valhalla and Folkvanger are 2 of the most renowned halls within the realm of the gods, Asgard. Valhalla is ruled by Odin, the chief of the Norse gods, who takes half of those that die in battle to his hall. The other half go to Folkvanger, which is ruled by the goddess Freyja. Given the amount of mythological Norse elements present in Origins, it's rather kind of fitting, with these Templars that did not ascend to either of the 2 halls spawning in from below the earth. However, that is merely one of many unsupported theories for the symbol's origins. It is maintained that the Black Sun symbol is simply a Nazi symbol, with the Nazis simply fabricating much, if not all, of its Nordic qualities for their own racist agendas. It is why you should not go outside wearing this symbol, because it's literally a common symbol used by neo-Nazis now. It's also kind of like how you should not tattoo the old Group 935 symbol on your body either, due to the fact that it contains a symbol for the SS. Like, you can often see misinformed zombies fans get the logo tattooed on their body, not knowing anything about the SS symbol, and it's like, no, bro. Then they come up by saying, oh, actually, it's ancient runes, bruh. But you know, like, the fact that it's basically a Nazi organization in the game should maybe be something to consider as well. But coming back to the Keepers, one may think that they appear sacred in the holy sense, but really they appear to be satanic, bro. Like, especially when you consider their faces with sharp teeth and skulls that resemble those of the Nova Crawlers that were introduced all the way back in Kino. The Shadow Man, having supernatural qualities himself, is clearly at odds with these other entities. It becomes yet another game of who to trust, a game we're all too familiar with at this point. Everything is not helped by these strange notes left everywhere in the form of ciphers. Notes like, the elders will continue to seed space and time, I must lead them to the place they cannot see, and although they have discovered the way Primus will fail, M is interested in these worthless beings. All his work will be undone. The formless one will be their downfall. And Tri-tongue, but oh god damn it. Now, these notes beg a whole bunch of questions like, who is Primus? Who is M? And who is the formless one? But the real question is, who is the motherfucker writing these notes, bro? For real. But coming back to the items we collect, the more disturbing part comes in how we use them. A certain artifact called the summoning key is introduced in this map. The Shadow Man calls it the most powerful artifact in the multiverse, urging us to guard it with our lives. As for the lore reason for why the most powerful artifact in the multiverse is in a crate in the back of a truck, it's probably just USPS losing the package again. Now, with the artifact in hand, we can go to certain areas associated with each of the 4 characters and begin rituals. The summoning key's power is demonstrated as it summons objects intended for sacrifice. We learn through the character conversations that the subjects in question happen to be key figures related to each of the characters, and Jessica's film producer, Jack's partner, Floyd's promoter, and Nero's lawyer. As the sacrifices commence, the keepers appear yet again, trying to stop us. Enduring the ritual turns the subject into a strange worm where their life essence or soul are collected inside the summoning key. After collecting each of the 4 subjects' souls inside the summoning key, we can head down to this area underneath the map, called the Rift, with this wall that now disappears. Heading through the newly opened passageway, we can see Lovecraftian motifs come back into play with these strange ancient carvings on the walls, almost as if it's a place of tribute or worship. There are 4 pedestals around the room, and we have the ability of placing each of the worms that we've obtained through the sacrifices inside them. Doing so allows us to commence one final ritual, but there really isn't much resistance. Many of the keepers show up once more, but they lack the power to seriously threaten us. And so, as it's our practical end goal at this point, we go ahead and complete the ritual to finally return our world to what it once was.
Your service to the overlords is appreciated. Our complete assimilation of this dimension will now proceed.
We really shouldn't have done that. Stepping outside, we can see for ourselves just what we've invited to our world. Behold, the pale blood sky. No wait, I got the wrong game. With the amount of parallels drawn to the Lovecraftian mythos, it was only a matter of time before we saw for ourselves the eldritch horrors beyond all human comprehension. While the usual approach is to establish them as beings that are always present, just hidden from view, as is the case in Bloodborne, here their being there is completely our fault. We invited them into the world, where now they can fully exercise their power. The Shadow Man was merely disguised as a human before, but now with these giant eldritch beings having taken full control of our world, he reveals what can only be assumed to be his true self, if that even is the only other form he can take. I do not recall distinctly when it began, but it was months ago. To a season of political and social upheaval was added a strange and brooding apprehension of hideous physical danger, a danger widespread and all-embracing, such a danger as may be imagined only in the most terrible phantasms of the night. I recall that the people went about with pale and worried faces and whispered warnings and prophecies which no one dared consciously repeat or acknowledge to himself that he had heard. A sense of monstrous guilt was upon the land, and out of the abysses between the stars swept chill currents that made men shiver in dark and lonely places. There was a demoniac alteration in the sequence of the seasons. The autumn heat lingered fearsomely, and everyone felt that the world and perhaps the universe had passed from the control of known gods or forces to that of gods or forces which were unknown. This is an excerpt of one of Lovecraft's short stories that introduces the eldritch god, Nyarlathotep. Nyarlathotep is said to be this god of deception that can shapeshift into countless forms to manipulate humans as he pleases. A common motif in Lovecraft's writings has to do with eldritch gods that generally don't care about your existence, with all the horror stemming from that idea. Nyarlathotep, however, is a god that does care. He takes on a human form and walks the earth, taking extreme pleasure in spreading madness and destruction, a quality that other powerful gods generally don't care about. While the Shadow Man is not a one-to-one replica of Nyarlathotep, he does strike quite a few parallels in taking on a human form for the purposes of spreading madness and destruction, utilizing masterful deceit to help in doing so. No better example of this can be found than in the map's remaining audio logs.
As you can see, these documents give some indication as to the considerable amounts of money we are talking about.
My client would never have signed the authorization on these loans.
Nonetheless, there it is, in black and white, signed by the Mrs. herself.
Nero's family estate is not what it once was. Even if these documents are genuine, we'll need some time to get our affairs in order.
I would advise your client that our company intends to aggressively pursue settlement within 1 week. 15 days at the most.
Look, I need to make a call. My secretary will see you out.
For the sake of brevity, I will not be including all of the audio logs, but the idea is that the Shadow Man hires the reporter to gather not only strange artifacts in Russia and the South Pacific, alluding to the summoning key among other things, but also the contact information for the 4 characters. With the contact information, the Shadow Man calls Nero's lawyer and completely lies about the massive amount of debt his wife had accumulated. After the lawyer informs Nero of the debt, which he presumed to be real, Nero proceeds to murder his wife to claim her life insurance policy. The same type of deception holds true for the others. The Shadow Man talks to Jessica's film producer, alluding to a fake movie deal near completion. He talks to Floyd's promoter, posing as a journalist, planting the idea that the general public does not care about Floyd and that the promoter would be better off just letting Floyd's opponent have the title shot. And finally, he talks to Jack's partner, posing as an internal affairs officer, asking him if Jack was on the take. And the idea there is that if you're a cop who's seen talking to internal affairs a lot, you'd be seen as a snitch, something Jack takes notice of. The Shadow Man, he essentially sets up the murders each of the 4 characters would end up committing. All of these 4 characters would then go on to murder some key figure under some completely made up pretext. What's kind of messed up is how in the map you can hear audio logs of phone calls made to the 4 characters where they were notified of this deception. Phone calls that the characters completely missed.
Nero, I have the most wonderful news. The loan documents were fraudulent. Well, your wife was fraudulent. She forged your signature on the loan agreements, and we can prove it. The date on the forms says November 5th last year. Exactly the same time that you were in the hospital following your performance of the Amphibious Man. You couldn't possibly have signed those papers. You were in a coma for the entire month.
There was a phone call made to each of the 4 characters, but the funny thing is that each of them had missed it as they prepared for whatever murder they'd been set up to commit. Jessica did not have to kill the photographer because there was no movie deal. Not only that, but to rub salt into the wound, the producer let her know that she had landed a guaranteed part in Broadway, something that would not be affected by any leaked photos. Jack never had to kill his partner either because his partner had called him and let him know that the officer questioned him, and he assured Jack of his loyalty and that he did not say anything. Floyd also never had to kill his opponent because he had gotten a call that he was going to get a title shot regardless of the match's outcome. And finally, Nero never had to kill his wife because there was no debt. It all falls into this twisted sort of deception that Nyarlathotep is known for. The Shadow Man does all this to get them to commit murder, the ultimate sin, which just so happens to be a prerequisite for the Great Rituals. After the 4 finish the final ritual, the Shadow Man and his associates, referred to as the Apothecons, are finally allowed into the world, where they aim to destroy it. So, I guess we're fucked then, huh? Kid named Floating Grimoire that holds the most powerful spells in the arcane arts. Just found out my apprentice has been practicing the dark arts. I must subdue him before he summons an elf twink to violate. Sire? It's too late. He has summoned the elf twink. No. All throughout the quest thus far, the ancient keepers were trying to stop you. Stop you for good reason, I might add. It seems that there's some bad blood between the keepers and the Apothecons, 2 primordial, extremely powerful races. It can be presumed that the keepers are benevolent beings, despite their appearance, as they try to stop the Apothecons from utterly destroying this dimension. Is it still possible to maybe cooperate with them and reverse the damage done? Well, through this grimoire of ancient spells that my apprentice regrettably used for worldly pleasures, one can begin enlisting the help of the keepers. A flag spawns underground in the rift spoken of prior, and what you have to do is charge the flag up 4 times using the life essence of the zombies, as well as the Apothecons who are the ones trying to stop you now. The Shadow Man himself spawns in numerous times as he tries to destroy the flag, but if you let the flag not take much damage, You proceed onward. Whenever the flag is charged once, a specific keeper is summoned and enlisted to help you defeat the Shadow Man. Doing this a total of 4 times allows you to finally proceed to the last step. Yeah, I know, a pretty short quest. Heading down into the ancient room underground, you can station the 4 keepers at the corners of the room before you begin a counter ritual. The counter ritual uses a summoning key to summon the Shadow Man himself along with all of his hired goons, and what results is a direct confrontation that can last a grand total of like 5 seconds. I shit you not. This boss fight can be so short and easy that it's funny when you consider the fact that you're battling great entities beyond human comprehension. Like, why do they always say they're beyond human comprehension? I can comprehend this shit just fine. Octopus looking at. Now this brings me to a point that I want to make. I am a huge fan of what zombies initially was. I absolutely adore cosmic horror as much as anyone. I'm sure it's obvious with how much I reference Lovecraft and Bloodborne, but the secrecy and subtlety initially present in zombies was a huge reason for why I fell in love with zombies and why it was so effective. I would like to emphasize that I am not saying this out of nostalgia. I absolutely adore Shadows of Evil, and I personally find it quite scary and unnerving, but cosmic horror should, in theory, have that same secrecy aspect present in the early games, especially when you consider that you're uncovering things you're not really supposed to be. At first, they executed phenomenally well with the secret audio logs of the reporter and stuff. Not long thereafter, though, you come face to face with these creatures you're not even supposed to think of or be aware of. Not only that, but you get to fight them and win. You can make the same argument for a game like Bloodborne, but the thing about Bloodborne is that the Eldritch Cosmic Gods actually do whip your fucking ass, bro, and they recite the words of Austin 3:16 before sending your ass back to the bonfire for real. Now here, though, honestly, the hordes of zombies put up a better fight than these cosmic gods. That's my biggest gripe with Blundell's take on zombies, as much as I do love it. That being said, though, you can take both Zielinski's and Blundell's zombies separately. It really isn't a competition or gang war. They each do things that are bad and good. Neither is perfect. But coming back to the counter ritual though, upon successfully defeating the Shadow Man, his very essence gets trapped inside the summoning key. The only thing left to do is to head to the center of the map where some keepers await the summoning key with the Shadow Man trapped inside, planning to possibly dispose of it after receipt. So you hand them the summoning key. Now, you might be like, whoa, so Shadows and Mob really are related to the main storyline, but the real question lies in the last gen version of this game, where you really have to wonder how this man's face passed QA. Now, that shit requires its own 8-hour analysis, goddamn. Now, the new Richtofen seems to be on some wacky-ass mission, which makes you realize just how surreal all of this must be for the 4 characters. Like, imagine you're Jessica Rose, and you're suddenly placed into this alternate reality ridden with zombies, horrors beyond human comprehension, and worst of all, some goofy-ass dude called the Shadow Man, and you work to save your dimension from total collapse, and just as you're about to finish, some German motherfucker from World War I pops in through a portal to steal your shit and disappear. Like, I hate when that happens, goddamn. All of this basically plays into the idea that between Origins and the Giant, maybe Richtofen had been working on stealing the summoning key, but did it really take him 2 years to do just that? Actually, when you think about conjuring a portal out of nothingness, it's not that crazy, honestly, but leave that aside. The more important thing here is the Apothecons are still there. The keepers never finished their ritual as the key got stolen, and when you listen to this final audio log left by Maxis, you realize how it was all rigged to be this way, and that the Apothecons will, in fact, destroy this world.
To any survivors of this realm, I am truly sorry. I wish I could offer you some words of comfort, but I cannot. It is my hope that I can rid the universe of the evil that has plagued us for so long. But in my heart, I know many more dimensions will be lost forever as we continue our journey towards peace. Forgive me.
You know, this pattern of shit always being rigged is really starting to get to me, but luckily, there does exist one sensible plotline in this game. The plotline of Dead Ops Arcade 2. Following the literal death of the big-ass gorilla in the previous installment, we see this other big-ass gorilla, now with cyber enhancements, grieving at his gravesite. Just who is this gorilla? Well, the only thing that matters is that he's now angry, vowing to take revenge. He starts the couch at 25k, starts hitting the gym, and Eddie Hall? Is that you? Oh shit, motherfucker doing calisthenics, man. Like, what's scarier than a big-ass gorilla? A big-ass gorilla who not only has cyber enhancements, but has also been hitting the gym for real. Now he tracks the man who killed the other gorilla down, stomps the shit out of him, and chokes his chicken. I should probably rephrase that. As per usual, you're then magically spawned into the first level and everything should seem familiar. The gameplay loop is exactly the same, you activate God mode and proceed through the levels for hours and hours till you find the big ass cyber gorilla, and let me tell you, bro is a bullet sponge. Must be all them nanomachines for real, but after killing him, the game merely gives you an ominous warning that while he may be dead, he has many brothers. You save your friend, and just as you're about to make out with him, bro, I really should be studying right now, the fucker resuscitates and sends your ass back to level 1 just like before. Now the game is rigged, the pattern shows up yet again. Now I honestly don't know if this is a cyber gorilla or one of his brothers, because he is lacking the nanomachines and shit, but the most interesting thing to come out of all of this is how you're rewarded with a mecha chicken that you can use as a power-up. And remember, this is still by far the most sensible thing I've explained in this entire video thus far, and I honestly think that's beautiful. Not their bestial relationship. I mean, bro, fuck this.